Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be digging into something I know a lot of you are really interested in: building wealth and achieving financial freedom.
A topic close to everyone's heart, I'd say.
For sure. And you know me, I like to go deep, so you send over some great material, including this podcast episode, Discover the Step-by-Step to Build Your Fortune.
Catchy title.
Right. Definitely grabbed my attention. It seems to be drawing some inspiration from classics like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We'll definitely unpack that.
Looking forward to it. There's a lot to unpack there, for sure.
Absolutely. And, I have a feeling we might end up debunking a few common money myths along the way.
Oh, I'm sure we will. There are a lot of misconceptions out there about
Oh.
wealth building.
Right. And this podcast jumps right in, claiming that a whopping 80% of millionaires are self-made.
80%.
Yeah.
That's a bold statement.
Right. They even bring in Proverbs, talking about slow and steady growth, which, okay, fair enough. But that got my thinking, is that 80% figure even true? And what does self-made even mean these days?
It's a great question. And it really gets to the heart of a lot of assumptions we have about wealth. There's this persistent idea that you're born into money, that it's all about inheritance.
Yeah, I could see that.
And while family money and privilege definitely play a role, let's be real, self-made doesn't necessarily mean starting from absolutely nothing. It's more about the significance of the individual's achievement in building their wealth. Now, that 80% statistic, we'd have to dig into their research to verify that.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too.
But I think the bigger point here is that many millionaires did actively build their fortunes. They weren't just handed them.
So it's not just about where you start, it's about how you run the race.
Exactly. And running that race successfully, that requires strategy, knowledge, and a healthy dose of resilience. It's about making smart choices with your money and understanding those underlying principles of wealth creation.
And speaking of strategy, this podcast episode tackles 3 common money myths head on. Buckle up, because I think this is where it gets really interesting.
I'm ready. Let's bust some myths.
Myth number 1, only the rich are born rich. To counter this, they point to the usual suspects: Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, those classic college dropout success stories.
Right. Familiar names.
But I'm guessing there's a bit more to it than that, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, while Gates and Zuckerberg are definitely powerful examples of people who achieved massive success without coming from wealthy families, it's important to at least acknowledge the role of privilege, even in their narratives.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. They may not have had family wealth, but they did have access to excellent education, resources, networks, things that, frankly, a lot of people don't.
That's a really important point. It's not just about being born rich. It's about having access to those opportunities.
Exactly. But that doesn't mean that upward mobility is impossible. People from all backgrounds can and do achieve financial success.
Right, for sure. Okay, so moving on to myth number 2. This podcast tackles, and this is a big one, especially these days, you need a college degree to be successful.
The classic debate.
Right. And again, they point to those big-name college dropouts as evidence. But again, something tells me there's a bit more nuance to it than that.
Absolutely. While a traditional 4-year college path isn't the only road to success, and we can all think of examples of that, let's not completely downplay the value of education, right?
Right, of course.
It equips you with knowledge, critical thinking skills, and often a valuable network. These are all helpful things, no matter what path you take.
So it's not that college is worthless, it's just that it's not the only path.
Exactly. And, this actually ties in with something Rich Dad, Poor Dad emphasizes as well: financial education. Something that's often missing, they argue, from traditional schooling.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Understanding how money works, that's crucial for building wealth, whether you learn it in a classroom or you learn it on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like that saying, don't work for your money, make your money work for you.
Exactly. Which actually perfectly introduces the next myth they tackle: money is the root of all evil.
Right. And they even pull from the Bible on this one, quoting 1 Timothy 6:9, the love of money is the root of all evil. Kind of an interesting strategy, I thought.
It is interesting. And biblically speaking, that distinction between money and the love of money, that's a key distinction. But even from a purely practical standpoint, it's a good distinction to make.
Yeah, I see that.
Money is a tool, just like anything else. It can be used for good or it can be used for ill.
Right.
The issue isn't money itself, but our relationship to it.
So it's not money itself, but the love of it that causes problems.
Precisely. The danger is greed, letting money control you rather than the other way around.
Right.
And even from a purely financial perspective, that kind of mindset can lead to reckless decisions and end up sabotaging your long-term success. So yeah, big distinction there.
That's a really good point. It's about having a healthy relationship with money, not letting it control you. But on a more practical note, how does this podcast we're exploring actually suggest people go about building their wealth?
Well, they kind of shift gears after debunking those myths and present what they call the real equation for building wealth, which is this: solving problems that people are willing to pay for.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Tell me more about this real equation.
So they start by emphasizing that time is a valuable resource, which, okay, we all know
All right, we all get 24 hours.
Exactly. We all get the same 24
Yeah.
hours. But it's not just about how much you work. It's about the value you create in that time. They actually quote Rich Dad, Poor Dad again here. Like,
They do love that book.
they do. But it's a good quote. They say, the rich don't work for money. Money works for them.
Okay, yeah, I've heard that one.
It's a good quote because it highlights that shift from trading your time for money directly to building something that generates income even when you're not actively working.
So it's about leverage, using your time and skills to build something bigger than yourself.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But what does it look like in practice?
Well, they give a couple examples. One is the example of, say, a cleaner versus an accountant.
Okay, yeah.
Both provide valuable services, right?
Right.
But an accountant, with their specialized knowledge, can potentially save people or businesses significant amounts of money, which means they can command higher fees. They're solving a problem with a bigger financial impact, you could say.
Because the perceived value of their problem-solving skills is higher.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this is where things get really interesting, especially for someone like you who's looking to achieve financial freedom.
So we've busted some myths, we've unpacked this idea of perceived value, but what does it all mean for someone who's actually trying to build their fortune? What are the actionable steps? How do we put this into practice?
Well, the podcast lays out, I think, a pretty clear path, and it all starts with identifying a problem and then creating a scalable solution.
Okay, makes sense.
And they emphasize this doesn't have to be some groundbreaking invention. It could even be as simple as, improving an existing service or product.
So even those small, everyday problems can represent big market opportunities if enough people need that solution, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
That's a really interesting way to look at it, almost empowering.
It is empowering.
Yeah.
And it leads directly to their next point, which is automation and delegation.
Yes. Working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. Figure out which tasks can be automated, which tasks can be handed off to someone else, so you can really focus on those higher level tasks that are going to move the needle.
Love it. Building a system that works, even when you're not the one doing every single task. Okay, so identify a problem, create a solution, automate, delegate, what else?
Well, then they suggest something that might seem a little counterintuitive at first.
Okay. Selling your business.
Really? Why would you put in all that work to just, sell it?
It's a great question, and I think it speaks to a common misconception about wealth building. Selling your business isn't about giving up. It's about recognizing opportunities.
Okay.
Maybe you've taken the business as far as you can, or a great offer comes along that sets you up for an even bigger venture down the line. They really emphasize that selling can be a strategic move, not a failure.
It's like graduating to a new level, but I imagine it all comes down to having the right mindset. Right?
100%. The podcast really hammers home the importance of cultivating what they call a millionaire mindset.
Okay, I like it. So what does that mean? What is a millionaire mindset?
Well, they break it down into 3 key components: abundance, perseverance, and focus. Okay, so believing in possibilities, sticking with it even when things get tough, and not getting sidetracked. It sounds simple enough.
It does sound simple, but I'm sure, as with most things, it's easier said than done.
Right. It takes work.
It takes effort. It takes intention. But cultivating that mindset, I think, can really make all the difference in actually achieving that financial freedom you're after.
Which, by the way, financial freedom, it's not just about having a lot of money, right?
Exactly.
It's about what that money allows you to do.
100%. It's about having control over your time and your resources.
And the freedom to pursue your passions, right?
Yeah.
Make choices that align with your values.
Exactly. And here's a final thought I'll leave you with, building on something the podcast mentioned. They encourage listeners to really think about what problems they're already solving, even in their current jobs. And I take that a step further. What are you uniquely good at? What are you passionate about? Often those passions and skills, those point to some really interesting hidden problem-solving opportunities.
Oh, that thing you do effortlessly that other people struggle with, that could be your key. I love that.
Right. It's about looking at your existing skills and passions through a new lens, the lens of problem solving and value creation.
Wow, this has given me a lot to think about. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into building wealth. It's been incredibly insightful.
It's been my pleasure.
And to everyone listening, I hope you found this deep dive as fascinating and useful as I have. Hopefully, it sparked some new ideas and maybe even inspired you to embrace a bit of that millionaire mindset. Remember, building wealth is a journey, but with the right approach, it's a journey you can absolutely make. That's it for today's deep dive, but keep those questions coming. Until next time.